All right, there we go. Just had to make sure my audio was working right. But anyways, hello everyone. Welcome back to Fandomology, where fandoms collide. Let me bring the mic a little bit closer here. And we are going to be having another, I know it's been 3 weeks, I'm sorry, but we are back to hold on one second. We are back to Paul's Bedtime Stories. We're picking up with Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and we are picking up in chapter 5. So, a little bit of a recap for the last chapter, as always, before we continue on. The heroes, of course, Luke and Leia, they got picked up in a town by a local lady who claims to be a master of the Force named Tala, and yet she does not act like your typical Jedi Master. She acts more like I said at the time that she reminded me more of Jaruus Sabayoth, like a template for that, because she acted very antagonistic and forceful and not, wise and caring like most Jedi Masters that we know of. Certainly not like Yoda. So we're going to go ahead and pick up in chapter 5. I don't know if I'm going to do the voices this time. We'll see what happens. Oh, wait, hold on. No, I'm wrong. We're in chapter 4. My bad. Let me update the stream title. That's how long we had been doing this, so I wasn't sure. Okay. Okay, so I'm wrong. It's not Tala. It's Hala. All right, here we go. By the way, I have to mention the last chapter literally ended with Luke and Leia, for whatever reason, wrestling in the mud. So that's where we pick up here. For our souls and health, she muttered hastily to the two combatants. Stop it, you two. Encased in mud, neither Luke nor the princess heard Hala's anxiously whispered warning. One of the men leaned to his right, spat something out between his beard, and commented, Servants not supposed to fight back, boys. Doesn't seem proper somehow, his companion agreed. Besides, the first man added, fighting in public's against the town decrees, ain't it? That's right, another man concurred. Maybe we can straighten him out before the night troop takes him in. Do him a good turn. He called down to Luke. Hang in there, young fella. We won't let her hurt you. Grinning and chuckling among themselves, the 5 stepped down off the walkway. Finding herself providently ignored by all concerned, Hala slipped back into the shadows. Is there anything we can do, madam? A voice said into her ear. She jumped. 3PO jumped. You've no right scaring me like that, you refugee from a scrap shop. I apologize, but my master and the lady. Oh, are you 3PO? The droid nodded slightly. And this must be R2. A beep sounded from a dim shape nearby. We can't do anything yet, I'm afraid. Maybe those bulk boys are just teasing. She peered back into the street. 2 of the men pulled Leia off of Luke. That provided them... excuse me. That provided them with a good glimpse of her for the first time. Their initial amusement abruptly shifted as less pleasant emotions surfaced. Well now, murmured a barrel-chested individual with a Manchu mustache. This is no droid servant, that's for sure. Leia became aware of the miner's stares. Several buckles and straps on the tight-fitting clothes had come undone while she had been wrestling with Luke. Despite the coating of mud over them, their exposed areas were drawing an uncomfortable amount of attention. She felt as if something was crawling all over her under her clothing. Ignoring the mud and trying to draw the loose ends of her attire together, she drew herself up regally, announced with shaky dignity. Thank you very much. This is a private matter. Now, if you'll all be so kind as to leave us to settle our differences. Thank you very much. This is a private matter, one of the men echoed in a mincing tone. The others guffawed. The one with the beard leered down at her. You're not a registered citizen, lady love, he indicated her soldier. No name tag, nothing. Fighting in a public streets against the law. Mine law says we got to apprehend anyone breaking the law when and where we can. Come here and let me apprehend you. Backing up a quick step, the princess continued to glare at them, but her confidence was seeping away like snow on a stove. I can't tell you who I am, but if any of you put a hand on me, you'll answer for it. Barrel Chest moved over. There was no humor in his voice, and he did not smile at her. Little mud hen, I'll put more than a hand on you. A slim form interposed itself between the princess and her would-be apprehender. Look, this is a private argument, and we can finish it ourselves, friend. I ain't your friend, Sonny, the man said evenly, putting out a hand and shoving Luke backward. Stay out of this. Your argument ain't important anymore. The princess let out a startled exclamation. One of the other men had slipped up behind her and had grabbed her around the chest with his left arm. Luke stepped over quickly, brought the edge of his palm down hard on the other's wrist. Letting out a hurt yelp, the miner stepped back, holding his wrist. It had grown deathly silent on the street. All eyes were now focused on Luke, not on the princess. The only sounds in the mist came from the distant jungle. Some boy wants to play, snickered the man whose wrist Luke had clipped. Resist in public apprehension. He flicked his right forearm. There was a clicking sound, and a double-bladed stiletto slid out from under his coverall sleeve. The flat of the blades lay flush against the back of his fist. Faded light from the shielded tavern windows reflected ominously off both blades as the man started moving in a low crouch toward Luke. The princess said nothing, just stared. So did Hala, 3PO, and R2 from the safety of the shadows. Come on, Sonny, the man urged, gesturing him with his unarmed hand for Luke to approach. Then he flicked the weapon, and two blades flashed out of his empty sleeve. He kicked his right leg, then his left. Double blades protruded from each boot sole. So if you can't, so he's literally got, he's going full Wolverine here. He's got a, no, actually, no, it's not Wolverine. It's X-23, where a blade out one hand, a blade out the other hand, and apparently two out both ankles. You want to talk about overkill. Come on, let's dance. I'll make it last, he said. Trying to watch all 8 blades at once. 8? What? Oh, okay. So each limb has 2 blades on it. Okay, I get it now. Trying to watch all 8 blades at once, Luke tried to distract his attacker. The lady and I were discussing something. We don't need any outside involvement. Too late, Sonny, the man grinned. You and I are involved now. His companions were watching and chuckling, obviously nudging one another. They were obviously enjoying every second of the action. Jumping forward, the knife wielder swung at Luke with his left hand, followed up the miss as Luke moved back with a spinning sidekick, then swung around in an arc, reaching with his right hand. The double blades made whooshing sounds in the thick, damp night air. We don't want any trouble, Luke declared, his hand moving reluctantly to the pommel of his lightsaber. In a couple of minutes, you won't have to worry about it, his assailant assured him. He dove with a yell toward Luke, who dodged both kicks and arm swings agilely. Look out, Luke! The princess shouted, too late. One of the other men had come up behind Luke and now pinned both arms to his sides. The knife wielder was approaching leisurely, the smile gone from his face, making entwining motions with his fists. The blades gleamed like his eyes. Fancy dancer, ain't you, boy? I'm tired of chasing you. Do him slow, Jake, one of the onlookers advised. Wise-mouthed kid. I said, Luke began, keeping his eyes on those nearing weaving blades, even as his right hand moved to his waist again. We don't want trouble. He pushed the stud of the hilt of the saber. Activated, the backward-pointing, meter-long beam of blue energy materialized, straight through the right thigh of the man who was holding him. Howling, The man let go of Luke and dropped to the ground, clutching at his leg. Knife Wielder froze for a moment, then started forward. With the saber, Luke described an intricate series of interweaving arcs and circles in the near darkness that caused his attacker to hesitate. A steady moaning came from the man on the ground. Luke lunged at the knife artist, just enough to make him retreat. "All of you now, clear off." Instead of clearing off, the grim-faced quartet exposed more blades and other hand weapons. They began maneuvering to encircle Luke, staying just out of range of that darting, lethal beam of light. Leia evened up the odds by leaping on the back of the man nearest her and clawing at his face. The three remaining men continued to probe at Luke with their own weapons, testing his speed and reflexes with professional acumen, talking amongst themselves and comparing notes on Luke's abilities, while planning the best way to take him. If they were waiting for their fourth companion to join them, they'd be disappointed. He had his hands full with the princess, who was now cursing them at the top of her lungs. Hala was looking on anxiously when movement further up the street drew her attention from the fight. A knot of efficient figures clad in black and white armor was moving at a fast trot toward the tavern. From the approaching Imperials, she looked back at the stalemated battle. One man lunged at Luke from behind. Luke jumped above the charged prod the man was wielding and swung downward simultaneously. Off came a hand, cut and cauterized neatly at the wrist to land in the mud and lie there smoking slightly. Again, I gotta call a timeout here. I'm gonna read that sentence again. Off came a hand, cut and cauterized neatly at the wrist to land in the mud and lie there smoking slightly. Again, another reminder that this book came out in 1978, before Empire Strikes Back. Now, what is the first limb that we see get cut off in all of Star Wars? It's that one drunk dude that was harassing Luke with his buddy in the Mos Eisley Cantina. You know, he tries to push Luke away, and the other guy draws his blaster, which Obi-Wan then pulls the lightsaber on him, cuts his arm off. Something notable about that scene is that there is a pool of blood coming from the severed arm, which never happens again in the series, which makes me wonder whether Lucas realized that the heat of a lightsaber would indeed cause someone's, say, stump, for lack of a better term, to cauterize itself, preventing bleeding. And he corrected himself here. So back to what I was saying. The man fell backwards, speechless, staring at his carbonized stump. The troopers were close now. Hala left her hiding place and gestured for R2 and 3PO to follow, slunk off down the accessway between the buildings, vanishing into the night. After a second's pause to see they could do no good by getting themselves captured, the two droids followed. Both remaining assailants continued to stalk Luke more cautiously now. Having dispatched her single opponent, with judicious pressure in the right place, the princess was looking to take on another when something sun-bright and loud exploded in their midst, stunning everyone. They all turned, blinking against the lingering glare, to see a number of energy rifles focused on them. "Put down your weapons," the sergeant in charge ordered them sharply, the angular markings on his armored sleeve showing triple in the dim light. Matching marks crossed his helmet. "You are remanded to custody in the name of the Emperor for fighting with weaponry in a public place." As soon as the miners had retracted or otherwise holstered their various weapons, Luke shut off his lightsaber. Two troopers came around and collected the small arsenal. The princess noticed her one victim recovering consciousness and kicked him soundly. "You there! Stop that!" the sergeant ordered. "Sorry," she replied sweetly. They were marched through the town under armed convoy. Luke took the opportunity to study the surrounding structures. Few showed much difference from those they'd already encountered. In a town like this, interchangeability was an economic necessity, he reflected. Those inhabitants who encountered them pressed close to the walls of the buildings and whispered amongst themselves, pointing from time to time at the unlucky miscreants. The spectators obviously had some idea what was in store for them. Where do you Luke wished he did too. Where do you suppose they're taking us? He murmured to the princess. To the local jail. Where else? Luke nodded forward. If that's it, I'm impressed. They were approaching a massive, forbidding ziggurat, Ziggurat, I guess that's how you say it, of ancient Membanian architecture. It was constructed of gray and black stone, exactly like the ruins Luke had spotted when searching for the princess's ship. The edifice towered, despite its roughly tapering shape, over the most recent, simpler structures of the mining town. Not your average lockup, he commented softly as they strode under the thick stone arch of the entrance. Boldly, he queried the trooper next to him. What is this place? The helmeted soldier turned to him with, prisoners and violators of the law are to provide answers, not questions. Surprisingly, as they moved down the stone corridor lined with modern tubing and electronic componentry, the trooper volunteered some information. This is one of the old temples built by the natives of this world. You mean those pitiful wretches who beg for drinks? Unexpectedly, the man laughed. Good, you've got a sense of humor. You'll need it. Greenies building this? You must spend all your time in the mines, not me. The trooper swelled with self-importance. I'm always trying to improve myself. As you know, he began, there are several semi-intelligent races on this world beside the Greenies. Some are more degenerate than the others. Whatever race built these places, and he gestured with his rifle at the stone roof arching overhead, has long since died out, at least insofar as the Imperial Survey has been able to determine. They turned another corner, and Luke marveled at the size of the structure. This one's been converted to house the mine offices and Imperial headquarters for Mimban. He shook his head. You miners, you don't know much of anything except your own work. That's true, Luke admitted, feeling no remorse at damning all miners. They hadn't been particularly hospitable to him since he landed in their company. We're from another town, he added for good measure. The trooper's brief venture into camaraderie vanished, and he replied coldly, That may or may not be. You chronic brawlers lie a lot. Just because the Empire tolerates a limited amount of disorder here as a safety value for you people is no reason to abuse the privileges. You make it tough on all your fellows. He pointed ahead to the trooper who was hefting the satchel of confiscated weapons. When killing devices are involved, it becomes more than a question of worker discipline. Charges will be brought. Too bad for you. I hope you get what you deserved. Thanks, said Luke dryly. One of the miners grumbled. Not our fault. Saberman and the woman led us on. Shut up, you, ordered the sergeant. You'll have your own chance to tell your side of it to Captain Supervisor Grammel. That caused both Luke and Leia to start violently. Grammel was the man Halla warned them about. Perhaps he'll be generous. The sergeant went on philosophically. Good workers are difficult to get here. He may leave you most of your fingers. I wished we'd asked Halla more about this Grammel, Luke murmured. Yes, Halla. The princess sounded discouraged. She didn't break her back trying to save us, did she? What could she do, Luke countered, against Imperials? You're right, I guess, but I would have thought she'd try something, Leia shrugged. I suppose I can't blame her for saving herself. At least 3PO and R2 got away, Luke added softly. Hey, any more chatter back there and I'll take off some digits myself, the sergeant warned. How would you like to bury yourself under 4 feet of mud for an hour? The princess snapped. I wouldn't, admitted the sergeant calmly. How would you like your pretty tongue burnt out with a low-power blaster? Leia subsided. They were in enough trouble. She'd gained nothing by provoking them more. She concentrated her stare on the middle of the sergeant's back, trying to drive him insane. The sergeant showed no hint of being affected. Probably solid bone under the helmet, she mused. They turned a last corner and entered a rock chamber. After the Spartan gray stone inside and out, the Sybaritic, Sybaritic. Again, if anyone can help me pronounce these words, I greatly appreciate that. Sybaritic furnishings here came as a shock. Real and artificial fur was used lavishly. Many of the creature comforts Luke would have associated with a far more developed world than Mimbon were present. They were not flaunted, however, which indicated that the inhabitant of this chamber regarded them as his natural accoutrements. Across the chamber, a single man sat behind an unimposing functional desk. "Bring them over, Sergeant." His bored voice was broken and gravelly. Luke thought he must have suffered some damage to his vocal cords. At a gesture from the sergeant, the 7 prisoners, including one with a limp and a crudely bandaged leg, were herded across the room to stand by the desk. The most impressive thing about Grammel, Luke thought, was the reaction to him by the miners. All of their bluster and swagger had disappeared. They stood staring at the floor, the walls, each other, anywhere but the man behind the desk. Feet shuffled uneasily. Without seeming to stare, Luke tried to see the personage who inspired such respectful subservience from hardened men like the 5 miners. Excuse me. Grammel had his head buried in his hands as he studied some paper. Finally, he rubbed his eyes, folded his hands, and leaned his elbows on the desk as he surveyed them. Grammel added no color to his surroundings. His face was eggshell pale, and the image of the Imperial officer was tarnished further when he stood to reveal a modest paunch curving gently from beneath his sternum like a frozen waterfall of suet to crash and tumble somewhere below the waistline in a jumble of uniform. The reason I laugh is because I'm envisioning everyone making fun of Lars Mikkelsen for being a little bit too pudgy as Thrawn, assuming that's even his natural physical shape. He could have been just padded in the front, but that's what it made me think of. The silver and gray uniform itself was spotless and neat, however, as if in an attempt to camouflage the belly beneath. Above the tight high collar, the neck jumped out to a square jaw bordered by a drooping mustache. The line of that facial hair matched well the dour expression the captain's supervisor wore, habitually, Luke guessed. Tiny, penetrating eyes peered out from beneath brows like a granite ridge, overtopped by uneasy black and gray hair. This was a face that rarely laughed, Luke decided, and then for the wrong reasons. Grammel began examining each of the uneasy group in turn. Luke borrowed a hint from the miners and tried to concentrate solely on a stain on the furred floor. So these are the disturbers who break the peace to fight with killing weapons, he observed disapprovingly. Once more that voice grated on Luke's ears, like a piece of rusty machinery long overdue for lubrication, full of grimy squeaks and groans. It suited Grammel perfectly. Stepping forward smartly, the sergeant reported, "Yes, Captain Supervisor. Permission to take the 2 wounded to the infirmary." "Granted," said Grammel. He did not quite smile, but his permanent frown faded enough from his lips to straighten slightly. "For a time, they will be better off than those who remain here." Under guard, the handless miner and the one with the limp were taken from the room. Grammel resumed his examination of the remaining people. When he reached Luke and the princess, his mouth twitched as if someone had jabbed him with a pin. "You 2 I don't recognize. Who are you?" He came around from behind the desk, stood nose to nose with Luke. "You, boy, what are you?" And real quick, I want to say hello to DJ Ronnie G, who gave a thumbs up and is currently riding his bike. Awesome, man. I hope I'm providing enough good entertainment for you as you're bike riding. Just a contract miner, Captain Supervisor, Luke stammered, trying to sound appropriately terrified. It wasn't a difficult task, nor did he mind a little verbal groveling if his life hung in the balance. Grammel moved to stare down at the princess. Now he smiled gingerly, as if the effort hurt him. And you, my dear? You're a miner too, I suppose? No, Leia didn't look at him. She nodded briefly toward Luke. I'm his servant. That's right, Luke said quickly. She's my only... I can hear, boy, Grammel murmured. He stared back at her, ran a finger down one cheek. Pretty woman. She twitched out of his grip. Spirited, too. He looked at Luke. I congratulate you on your taste, boy. Thank you, sir. Leia glared at him, but what else could he have said? Your manners are probably matched only by your incompetence. Grammel merely nodded with satisfaction. Manners, he repeated. Incompetence. Odd way for a servant to speak. He barked at the sergeant standing stiffly at attention nearby. What identification did you find on these two? Identification, Captain Supervisor? We assumed that it was standard, sir. You haven't checked their identification, Sergeant? Grammel inquired slowly. Succeeding only in giving the impression of a man sweating beneath his armor, the officer explained lamely. No, sir. We just assumed. Never assume, Sergeant. The universe is full of dead people who lived by assumption. That's actually a pretty powerful statement right there. I'm going to steal that one. He turned politely to Luke and Leia. Your identification now, please. Luke made a pretense of searching his clothing, tried to look stunned when the non-existent identification didn't materialize. The princess fought to imitate him. We must have lost it during the fight, he declared, then hurriedly tried to change the subject. These three now, attacked us without provocation, and it's a lie, one of the miners objected strenuously. He looked to Grammel for sympathy, found none. You, Grammel told the man very quietly, shut up. The man complied with alacrity. What does alacrity mean? I've never understood that. I'm going to look that one up. Okay. Alacrity. According to Google and Oxford languages, it means brisk and cheerful readiness, as in she accepted the invitation with alacrity. Okay, cool. A trooper entered the chamber, called out ingratiatingly. Captain Supervisor? Yes, what is it? He appeared... Let me try that again. Grammel appeared irritated at the interruption. Yes, what is it? The trooper approached the desk, whispered something in Grammel's ear. Grammel looked surprised. Yes, I'll see him. He walked toward the door. A small cloaked figure entered and engaged Grammel in conversation. Luke couldn't make out more than an occasional word. Leaning over, he whispered to the princess, I don't like this, Leia. She whispered back tightly, You have this wonderful, evocative way about you, Luke, of reducing the most excruciating, uncomfortable circumstances to the merely mundane. Luke looked hurt. The captain concluded his conversation with the stunted figure, which promptly bowed and scurried out of the room. Idly, Luke wondered if the thing under the cloak was human, or maybe one of the natives. His speculation was interrupted by Grammel's return. You miners started the fight, he stated in a no-nonsense tone, pointedly excluding Luke and Leia from that category. Oh, but Captain Supervisor, the largest of the three began obsequiously. I think. Okay, I gotta look that one up too. Obsequious definition. Obsequious. Obedient or attentive to an excessive or servile degree. Okay. So basically paying too much attention. Why am I blurry? That is weird, man. Why? How did I suddenly go blurry? All right. We're going to go. Let's see. Can I fix. I wish there was a way that I could, like. All right. I'm trying to refocus my camera. All right. That worked. So we're back to it. Oh, but Captain Supervisor. And hello in the chat to Virginia, who says, I was literally just typing about the fact your camera was blurry. I don't know why. Well, okay. I do know why it does it. It's because somehow my face goes out of focus, but I didn't do anything to make it go out of focus, so I don't know. Oh, but Captain Supervisor, the largest of the three, began obsequiously. We were provoked. We were trying only to uphold the town law about fighting. By breaking it, Grammel countered, and by attacking this young lady. It wasn't anything serious, the man ventured. We were only going to have a little fun first. Your fun will cost each of you a half-time period's pay, Grammel declared. I'm going to be lenient with you. The three men hardly dared appear hopeful. The mine laws here are lax and permit you considerable leeway in terms of relaxation. Now he glowered at them. However, assault with intent to murder is not the Empire's idea of productive leisure. Whatever I may think personally, he added as an afterthought. Emboldened, one of the miners decided to push his luck. Stepping forward, he announced, Captain Supervisor Grammel, I appeal the judgment. And Virginia says, you took your hat off and adjusted your hair. I think the blurry camera started shortly after that. Okay, fair enough. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Emboldened, one of the miners decided to push his luck. Stepping forward, he announced, Captain Supervisor Grammel, I appeal the judgment. Grammel eyed the man away the way a botanist would a new species of weed. Not that type of weed. You have that right. On what grounds? Shortness. Shortness of trial and informality of circumstances, the man finally got out. Very well. Since I am the imperial law here, I will consider your appeal myself. Grammel paused a moment and then said easily, your appeal is rejected. Then I appeal to the Imperial Department of Resources representative in charge of mining operations, the man riposted. I want to see the judgment reviewed in another fashion. Certainly, Grammel agreed. He walked over to the wall behind his desk, taking a long, thin bar of plastic from its place there. He pressed the switch at one end as he came back around the desk. The conversation has been recorded, he informed them all. He depressed another switch, and the bar showed a moving line of words across its waxy surface. When the record had finished, he raised and abruptly... Oh, hold on a second. When the record had finished, he raised and abruptly thrust one end of the unyielding plastic into the argumentative miner's left eye. So dude literally got stabbed in the eye with what's effectively a microphone. Wow. Blood and pulp squirted in all directions as the man collapsed, screaming on the floor. One of his terrified companions bent over him, trying to staunch the flow of blood from the ruined socket. It ran in a steady stream down the man's face and coverall front. You three are dismissed, Granwell told them perfunctorily, as if nothing unusual had happened. Sergeant, Captain Supervisor, take these three into the rear holding cells. Their companions can join them as soon as they are well enough. Let them sit and think for a while. Record their names and identification codes so that they may more easily pay their fines, unless, he finished conversationally, tapping the recorder rod in one palm, someone else would like to appeal my judgment. As the two miners half carried, half dragged their unconscious companion to the exit under guard, Grammel gestured at them with the rod. He still has his eye, you know. It's recorded permanently on this. Bring him back when he recovers, and I'll let him see it again. Oh my goodness. Wow. The sergeant saw the guards and miners out, then returned to the stand watch beside the door. I dislike these administrative details, Grammel said amiably to Luke and the princess. But this is a largely unknown, unexplored world, and I have little time to waste. Sometimes my decisions must be fast and harsh. Only the degree of their ability to devise more sophisticated debasements for themselves separates the human animals that work here from the natives. This kind of inventiveness has been a persistent and lamentable quality of mankind's for millennia. Realizing that as you must, and I'm sure you too will be more sensible than those lower types who just left us. He sat back on the edge of the desk, commenced tapping his lower leg with the red-tipped rod. Luke watched it nervously. I told you, Captain Supervisor, he reiterated. We must have lost our identification in the fight. It must have fallen back into the mud. If you just let us go back there, I'm sure we can find it, unless, he added with seeming concern, someone came by after the fight and stole it. Oh, I don't think any of our hardworking citizens would do that, Grammel commented, turning away. He looked sharply back over his shoulder. In fact, I don't think it's lying there either. I don't think you two had any identification to lose. From what I've been told, you are both more than strangers to this town. You're strangers to the mine, to the imperial presence here, to this very world. How you arrived, undetected and unauthorized and in one piece, I can't imagine. He gritted his teeth and added dangerously, I will find out, however. I always find out what I want to know. That's funny, noted the princess, because you strike me as having a particularly limited capacity for learning. Her remark didn't faze Grammel. If anything, the princess's studied insults appeared to please him. A little while ago, young lady, you called me incompetent. Now you belittle me intellectually. I'm no intellectual, but I'm also neither incompetent nor uneducated. I got that way by learning how to get answers to questions. But your first comment was correct about my manners. He drew back his left foot and kicked her in the left thigh with the point of his boot. Moaning in pain, the princess grabbed her side below the hip and sank forward to her knees. Her right hand stopped her fall, while the other continued holding the bruised place. Luke raged inside, but resolutely stared straight ahead. This was not the place or time to die. However, I am straightforward, Grammel continued, gazing down at her. Using his leg again, he kicked her right arm out from under her. She fell forward and then rolled over and sat up, still holding her left leg. The captain's supervisor kicked out sharply, catching the base of the spine, but not hard enough to paralyze her. She wailed as both hands went to the small of her back, and she fell over on her side, where she lay moaning. Grammel drew back his leg again. Unable to stand by any longer, Luke stepped between them and said rapidly, If I told you the truth, Captain Supervisor, you wouldn't have believed me. The offer was intriguing enough to cause Grammel to forget the princess for the moment. I'm always willing to listen, young man. Luke took a disconsolate breath, looked downcast. We're escaped criminals from Sir Carpus, he confessed painfully. We're wanted there for extortion and blackmail. He indicated the prone form of the princess. The girl's my partner in lure. We Made the mistake of compromising some people who turned out to be more important than we thought. We're not very important criminals, but we managed to get some very important people mad at us. Go on, urged Grammel noncommittally. Sir Carpus still maintains the death penalty for many crimes, Luke continued. It's a hectic, private enterprise-style world. I know all about Sir Carpus, the captain supervisor snapped impatiently. Luke hastened to go on with his story. We stole a small life ship. We'd heard about the small colonies on 12 and 10. So you tried to flee there, Grammel interjected. Logical enough. In hopes of finding a way to gain passage out system, Luke finished rapidly. His enthusiasm was honest because Grammel, at least so far, hadn't rejected the story out of hand. We added for good measure, went so far as to consider joining the rebels if that would help us escape prosecution. You'd both make pretty pitiful traitors, Grammel observes. The rebels would have sneered at you. They don't enroll criminals into their ranks. Odd, since technically they're the worst sort of criminals. Anyone can see by looking at you that you'd never be accepted by them. Fortunately, the princess was in too much pain to snicker, Luke knew. I happen to think that your story, young man, though plausible, is a cleverly crafted falsehood. Luke went cold inside. But it could be true. If that's the case, if you are what you claim to be, we might even manage to bend the laws a little for you. I admire ingenuity in others. We might even find something for you to do here on Mimban. The Empire has many malcontents working in the mines. You've already encountered 5 of them. Of course, he concluded, I could always return you to Sir Carpus for prosecution there. Oh no, Captain Supervisor, Luke cried, dropping to his knees and clutching desperately at Grammel's trouser legs. Please don't do that. They'll have us executed. Please, we'll work till we drop. But don't send us back there. He was sobbing openly now. Get off my boots, Grammel ordered, disgustingly. As Luke backed away obediently, the captain supervisor bent to brush at his pants where Luke had touched him. Wiping tears conjured with difficulty away from his eyes, Luke tried not to appear too hopeful as he regarded Grammel. The princess, meanwhile, had shifted to a sitting position. She was still rubbing the small of her back with one hand, carefully avoiding Grammel's gaze. As I stated, everything you told me is possible and unlikely, the captain supervisor went on. He eyed Luke in a funny way. There is one thing which does interest me, however. It would be a sign of your good faith if you were honest with me about it. I don't understand, Captain Supervisor, Luke admitted blankly. I am told, Grammel continued, that you have in your possession a small gemstone. Luke froze. And that is the end of chapter 4. So it's here that at least the minor villain has been introduced fully now in Captain Grammel. Someone that obviously has let age get to him, but is still has enough authority to where the locals are scared of him. Now, I know because I've seen it on the cover of other versions of this book that Vader himself, of course, makes an appearance in this story. So, how that ultimately plays out, I don't know. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to predict that Grammel is going to do something that displeases Vader and makes Vader kill him, as he would do in Empire Strikes Back. Tala is, and I'm going to also predict that next chapter, if not the one after, Hala, C-3PO, and R2 are going to stage some sort of jailbreak for Luke and Leia. Although, I might have said this before last time, but I'm going to say it again. Where in the world is Han Solo and Chewie? because they are equal parts the hero of the Star Wars original trilogy as Luke is, at least in my opinion. And Virginia says, "Sir, if you wait 3 more weeks to read chapter 5, I'm not going to do that. The most you'll have to wait is 1 week. I promise." So yeah, like I was saying, is Han Solo and Chewie going to make an appearance in this story, or is this literally about Luke and Leia? A story about Luke and Leia is not bad. I wouldn't complain if that's the case, but I do think a piece of the story would be missing if it was just Luke and Leia, and we never at least got a mention of Han and Chewie. But anyways, that's going to be for next week. So, like I said, every Friday now is going to be Paul's Bedtime Stories. And so we'll be back with Chapter 5. In the meantime, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we will talk to you guys later. The loading bar is still going on my end, by the way. That's why I'm staring. I'm waiting for it to end. I don't know why this thing's... That was odd.